The legendary Ryzen 3600 came out in 2019, and it's still powering millions of PCs today. So the question is, in 2026, can the legend still hang? Or let me rephrase it, can modern NVIDIA tech rescue an old CPU? I paired a 3600 with an RTX 5060 and threw LEGO Batman Legacy of the Dark Knight at it to find out. A quick word on this pairing. People upgrade GPUs way more often than CPUs, meaning new cards often end up on aging platforms. The 5060 is aimed at 1080p gaming, same target the 3600 was built for. Additionally, following the 2026 global RAM crisis, upgrading from AM4 to AM5 is not easy. Now, onto the benchmarks. Baseline. No upscaling, no frame gen. Starting with Epic at native 1080p. And it's rough. Averages are barely in the 20s, and the 1% lows are hitting 0. That's not a dip, that's the game freezing outright. But here's what's interesting. GPU utilization looks high, but the power draw is barely half of what this card is rated for. It's reporting busy, but it's not actually rendering. VRAM is nearly full, so the card is spending its time shuffling assets in and out of 8 gigs instead of pushing frames. And the CPU isn't maxed either. So at Epic, the real choke point is VRAM, not the processor. High preset, big jump from Epic, but it still doesn't feel great. The frame time graph tells the story. It's jagged. Average looks decent, but the lows are less than half that, so the game is constantly hitching between smooth frames and stutters. CPU usage climbed a lot here, so the processor is finally being asked to work, but VRAM is still nearly full. Dual bottleneck. Playable on paper, stuttery in practice. At medium setting, and now it actually feels smooth. VRAM pressure is gone, frame time graph settled down, the Batmobile finally drives like it should. But look at GPU utilization. It's under half. This is the clean CPU bottleneck. The 3600 can't feed the GPU fast enough, so all that headroom just sits there unused. And without any AA at medium settings, the image is noticeably rougher. High setting really made Gotham pop visually. So we've got smooth gameplay, but a GPU that's begging for more work. At low setting, and here's something people get wrong. You'd think dropping settings would help when the CPU is the limit, but it barely moves the needle. We gained a handful of frames over medium, yet the GPU is now sitting at barely a third utilization, almost entirely idle. And visually, it's noticeably worse. When the CPU is the bottleneck, lowering graphics just starves the GPU of work without giving the processor any relief. Medium looked better, felt nearly as smooth, and actually used the hardware you paid for. Chapter 2, DLSS modes at high. And this is where it gets paradoxical. People assume AI upscaling will help, but VRAM is full across every single mode. DLAA through ultra performance doesn't matter. The average barely moves, everything still stutters. Why? Because DLSS itself needs VRAM. When you're already against 8 gigs, enabling it just trades one pressure for another. This is a GPU limitation, not a CPU one. And Epic with DLSS? Don't even think about it. Medium with DLSS, and this is where it gets interesting. VRAM is finally under control, and DLAA and quality both look gorgeous. But look at the averages. DLAA and quality land at the same frame rate. And the more aggressive modes, they actually perform worse. Performance and ultra performance drop frames instead of gaining them because the CPU is the ceiling here. Pushing DLSS harder just idles the GPU with nothing to show for it. So at medium, DLSS is a visual upgrade, not a performance one. Quality is the sweet spot. Low with DLSS? And the pattern holds. We gain maybe a handful of frames over medium, but the GPU drops into the 30s. It's practically asleep. 1% lows are a touch more consistent, but not enough to justify what you lose visually. DLSS can sharpen the image, but it can't add back the lighting and detail that medium gave you. So, between medium DLSS quality looking gorgeous at 70 and low barely gaining anything while looking worse, medium is still the better deal.
Frame generation only, high preset. The displayed frame rate looks impressive, 80s, 90s, but this is a lie. The 1% lows are in the low teens across every mode, and the latency? Over 200 milliseconds at 3x. I was moving the mouse and it just wasn't registering. 3 or 4 seconds of dead input. Tried forcing reflex, re-recorded it, nothing helped. VRAM is full again. FrameGen needs its own memory for AI models and frame buffers, and at high, there's simply nothing left to give. The counter says 90, the game says unplayable.
Medium with FrameGen, and this is where everything changes. The displayed frame rate explodes. We're talking triple digits across the board. And at 4x, the counter's pushing past 200. But more importantly, look at what fixed itself. VRAM has headroom, 1% lows jump from the teens to the 30s, and latency dropped from over 200 milliseconds to under 50. At high, FrameGen was painting big numbers over a broken foundation. At medium, there's actually a solid frame rate underneath, and FrameGen multiplies it into something genuinely smooth.
Low with FrameGen, the numbers go even higher, pushing close to 300 at 4x. But here's the thing. Medium was already well past what any monitor or human eye meaningfully benefits from. The extra frames are real, the 1% lows are a touch better, but the visual downgrade is also real. Medium with FrameGen gave us triple-digit frame rates with a world that still looked good. Low just trades image quality for numbers you'll never actually feel. Medium wins.
FrameGen 2x with DLSS at medium, stacking both technologies. Thinging alone hit around 130, add DLAA or quality on top, and the average actually drops a few frames. GPU utilization drops too. The card is rendering less but gaining nothing because the CPU is still the ceiling. Visually, DLAA does clean up the image, but at 2x you're paying a frame rate tax for it. Now, FrameGen 4x with DLSS? And this is where the full stack finally clicks. DLAA lands around 235, FrameGen 4x alone was 246, essentially identical. The performance cost of adding DLSS just disappears at 4x. At 2x, the overhead was noticeable. At 4x, the multiplier is high enough to absorb it. GPU utilization backs this up. DLAA pushes it into the mid-70s, the highest we've seen at medium. The card finally doing meaningful work on anti-aliasing and frame generation at the same time. And visually, the difference is real. Smoother edges, cleaner world, an image that finally matches the frame rate. This is the config. Medium, DLAA, FrameGen 4x.
Low preset, DLSS plus FrameGen, the final round. FG2X, same pattern as medium. Adding DLAA or quality costs a few frames compared to FG alone. High 140s instead of mid 150s. GPU drops into the 50s with quality and balanced, rendering less, gaining nothing. CPU still the ceiling in the mid 70s. And visually, even DLAA can only sharpen edges at low. It can't bring back detail to preset removed. FG4X, the numbers are massive. DLAA hits close to 270, quality near 280, FG alone was 282. At 4X, the DLSS overhead vanishes again. GPU utilization with DLAA pushes into the low 70s, the highest at low, doing both anti-aliasing and frame generation with purpose. CPU, same wall, low 70s every mode. But here's what matters. Low at 269 versus medium at 235, 34 more frames. No monitor, no human eye tells the difference. What is visible is the world. Medium's lighting and atmosphere versus low stripped back version. Medium, DLAA, FG4X remains the config. Low just confirms it from the other side. Here's a fun experiment. I took every single setting to the absolute floor. 720p internal resolution, DLSS ultra performance, every quality slider on low, view distance near. And the result? GPU usage sat between 25 and 37%. Gameplay was somewhere between 58 and 74 FPS, depending on the scene. Now, same game, native 1080p, no anti-aliasing, low preset. That's nearly double the pixels the GPU has to push. And the frame rate? 65, averaging 79. GPU? 34%. Almost identical. So let that sink in for a second. I halved the resolution. The frame rate barely moved. I doubled it back. The frame rate barely cared. Because the GPU was never the one deciding how fast this game runs. The 3600 is handing over roughly the same number of frames per second, no matter what's happening on the GPU side. You could strap a 5090 to this chip, and these numbers would look almost the same. That's what a pure CPU bottleneck means. So we just took everything to the floor. Now let's flip it and go the other way, all the way up. Because 2K is supposed to be the resolution where you finally start sweating about your graphics card. Here's our starting point. 1080p medium DLAA, the sweet spot. The GPU is barely awake at 57%, sipping under 100 watts. Average frame rate, 69. Now I bump it to 2K, same medium preset, DLSS on quality, and watch the GPU wake up. 57% jumps to 74, power climbs almost 20 watts. The card is clearly being asked to do more, so the frame rate takes a hit, right? Nope, still 69, identical. Now here's what trips people up. Everywhere else in this video, a CPU bottleneck meant low GPU usage. The painter's sitting idle. So why is it at 74 now? Because that number doesn't tell you who sets the frame rate. It tells you how hard the card works on each frame. Light 1080p frames, the GPU finishes early and waits. Heavier 2K frames, it has to sweat, so usage climbs. But the giveaway, the 3600's still handing over the same 69 frames a second. Bigger canvases, same count. The GPU just spent headroom it already had. It never maxed out, so it never became the bottleneck. And no, this isn't VRAM. Layer frame gen on top of both? Same story on both resolutions, neck and neck. The 1% lows on the 2K config even hold a touch steadier. Down at 720p, the frame rate barely moved. Up at 2K, it barely teared. Same chip, same frames every single time.
All right, verdict time. Let's go preset by preset. Epic and High couldn't even run properly. But here's the thing. That wasn't the CPU's fault. That was a VRAM issue. 8 gigs on the 5060 just isn't enough for those presets in this game. The card was choking on memory, not waiting on the processor. So I can't really blame the 3600 for that one. If you want me to retest this with a card that has more VRAM, 16 gig 5070 or something, to see where those presets actually land, drop it in the comments. I'm genuinely curious too.
Medium with DLSS. This is the one that should have worked, and honestly, it was underwhelming. The GPU still wasn't being pushed to its limit, and the frame rate kept dipping below 60 in busy scenes. For a medium preset, that's not great. The only thing that saved this configuration, the only thing, was turning on frame generation at 2x. That pulled it back above 60 and made it actually playable. Low with DLSS? Yeah, the frame stayed above 60. But have you seen what low looks like in this game? The visual downgrade is brutal. You're playing Lego Gotham, and it looks like Lego Gotham on a budget. The performance gain just isn't worth what you're giving up. And the frame gen plus DLSS combo at low? Same story. You're stacking two technologies to fix a problem that medium with frame gen already solves better, while looking twice as good. So here's where I land personally. I aim for 60 FPS most of the time. Not all of the time, not some of the time, most of the time. And the 3600 just can't deliver that anymore in a game like this without serious help. The time has come for the king to rest. But if you have this set up right now and you want to play this game tonight, here's exactly what I'd run. Medium preset, DLAA, frame generation 2x. That's your sweet spot. You get a clean image, you stay above 60, and the game looks the way it's supposed to look. And honestly, if you want to push it, frame gen 4x works too. I tested it. I did not notice much ghosting at all, even at 4x, which surprised me. So if your eyes aren't bothered by the latency trade-off, go for it. It feels smoother, noticeably smoother. And if you're on a 2K monitor, the recipe barely changes. Keep it medium, swap DLAA for DLSS quality, and run FrameGen 2x or 4x. Since the 3600 caps your frame rate at the same spot no matter the resolution, that bigger, sharper picture is basically free. 7 years, $200, millions of rigs. The Ryzen 5 3600 earned its crown. But in 2026, with Unreal Engine 5 open-world games demanding more and more from the CPU, it's time to start thinking about what comes next. Long live the king.